The sun goes down, the stars come out, and all that counts is here and now. My universe will never be the same. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you came.
You are listening to Paramania Radio.
Do you like ghost stories? Want to hear about some of the haunted homes and locations that I've investigated? Tune in for the latest in paranormal news and guest interviews with me, Mr. Haunted, on the Haunted Chronicles, Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, only on the Paramania Radio Network.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Paramania, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
You are listening to Paramania Radio.
You're listening to the Parasearch UK radio show with your hosts Kerry Greenaway and Jay Lynch, right here on Paramania Radio.
Welcome everybody to the Parasearch UK radio show, and we're back. Hi Kerry, how are you, love?
Hi, darling. I'm fine, thank you.
Just fine.
Oh, I'm really good, actually. I've got a cracker of a little topic for you tonight, but I'm really looking forward to this one.
God,
Looking forward to this one.
If y'all haven't noticed by now in this amount of time that Kerry and I have been working together, she's almost like having an English version of Teresa. She loves the fact when she can find something that's going to twist my little mind and irritate the piss out of me sometimes.
I think we're both the Mickey out of the article, quite frankly, but there you go.
Well, but with that said, I must say that I absolutely adore both of them, so touche.
Yeah. See, Teresa, he adores us, really.
I know. That's what he says on radio, anyway.
Yeah. Behind our backs, behind
That's
my back.
Right.
It's probably, what the hell is she talking about this week?
What the hell she dragged me into? I'll talk about anything. It's obvious because, we've all heard me. And let's not forget about the one and only Dr. Dave in the back corner being all quiet and nice right now.
Yes, I am here. Good evening.
And we have one of his favourite topics tonight, too.
Yes, I am looking forward to this.
I bet you are.
So this is going to be the Kerry and Dr. Dave show. I must take a back seat.
Mate, it so isn't. It's going to be the Dr. Dave show because I've just go, it's all timey-wimey stuff. It's all timey-wimey stuff. So, right, let's crack on. I came across a lovely little article during the week, which I thought was quite funny, which was about somebody called, now the English way of saying this would be Ilana, or it could be Lana Remikee. How would you say it? Would you say that was Ilana or Lana?
How do you spell it?
Teresa's not looking at the article.
I'm trying to get logged on. I just walked in, remember?
I'm going to say Laurel.
You're going to say Laurel. Well, I'm going to say...
Great.
Oh, we'll go with Lana or Alana. I'm going to go with Ilana. Sod it. I'm going to go with Ilana. Ilana Remikee. Is she a real person? And then it led me into an article about time travel. And it fits so nicely with your Americans because it's all about American presidential things and time travel and all sorts of stuff. It's absolutely brilliant. So, love this. Basically, there's a kid, teenager looking kid. Can't really tell because it's on the video itself. It's actually quite pixelated and the voice is quite distorted. But he calls himself Noah and says he is originally from 2021 but has travelled forward to 2030 and just come back to now. Right? But he says he's not a teenager at all. He's actually a 50-year-old that has taken top secret drugs to rejuvenate his body. And, you know, that's why he looks so young. And he has gained worldwide press attention after revealing that he worked as part of a government time travel project. He just love it.
Where is Jean-Claude Van Damme when you need him? Let me tell you.
Not only that, but he has made some predictions about the future of the United States politics.
Oh, yay.
I know. Apparently, he was allegedly hooked up to a lie detector whilst making these claims. I love this bit. They were validated by a green box, which was popped up on the screen saying, true. That was real. Now, the claims he's made about the US president's election is that Donald Trump will get re-elected in 2020. Right? But
Re-elected?
Re-elected.
Yeah, in 2020.
Yeah. And the next future president is actually going to be this Ilana Remikee. Now, what I loved about this is people went mad about this and have tried to find this woman. But he says, right, now get this. When he visited 2030, she was the elected president. But that's not an election year.
No, it's not.
Well, that doesn't mean they was elected that year.
That's
it just
true.
means she was the president at that time.
True. Now, 2028 would be the election year, right?
So she could have been either the vice president or the secretary of state or the secretary of what else?
She didn't have to be either of the
order
same.
of a succession, because multiple people could basically bow out of taking the presidency if something happened to the president. And the order of succession.
She could be elected in, though, if the last election prior to that, because you got to be 35 years old and a U.S. citizen.
Correct. Now, this is a key point, right? If this is allegedly the next president of the United States of America, it's only 8 years away. So she would...
Yes.
Yeah, we're in 2020, aren't we?
Yep.
So she's elected in 2028. So she was the elected president when he visited in 2030.
Oh, I
see.
what you're
4-year
saying.
term.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah, a 4 years term.
Okay.
Yeah. It's only 8 years away, isn't it? So she would have to be sort of either coming up to that age or be part of the offices or, you know, part of the political system already. You would think that she would be around, at least.
Well...
True? Because you have to be between 35, you have to be over 35, don't you, to take
35 and
office?
older. So that's what I'm saying.
Did you see the link
She's
that I
alive
sent
now.
you? Because there's a Ilana Remikee for president. It says,
Oh,
where
yeah,
will you be
there
in
is a
2030?
whole
Start
thing,
making
yeah.
it happen today.
Yeah. They can't find this woman, though. This is the thing, right? Now, the whole thing sort of is a little bit flaky. Let's put it that way.
I'm not going to rain on this parade.
Now, Noah, this guy, claims
Bullshitter?
that... Well, no, he claims that Ilana was actually born in 2009.
So she's going to be what? 21 in 2030?
Yeah, she can't be president.
So she
can't be
cannot
president.
qualify to be president. of the United States.
Not unless we have some catastrophic viral outbreak that kills off everyone above the age of 18, and the whole system of government collapses, and they form a new government.
Oh my God!
It was in a movie.
Oh, now there's a
It
conspiracy theory.
was in a movie.
It's a zombie apocalypse.
Oh, I love a zombie apocalypse.
There was actually a movie about that.
Did y'all just hear that sound? You're making me drink tonight.
Now, oh my God, there's so many people have jumped all over this and set up loads of fake accounts in the name and everything. Oh, it's brilliant. If you Google it, you can find loads about this alleged person.
You know what I see here?
Go on.
Absolutely brilliant advertising. Because remember before the Blair Witch thing came out, they did some amazing advertising about it and stuff, and it made it look like real, and people really thought that really happened.
People thought it really happened.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Here's
So I did a lot of research.
Yeah, this seems like something here that's another thing for creating a big hysteria, and it's going to be some kind of media ploy. Because it's so easy to search to find this person. If they truly exist, you can Google them. They're going to be there. There's no way they can hide from every single person. So this seems like nothing but a big, hoaxy-ass media ploy to me.
Oh. It gets a little stranger. Okay. So he also it gets stranger. He reckons also, Noah, this is the person that said this, that this Ilana Remikee is actually a descendant of American civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. Now, if that's the case, we should be able to look at his record, his family tree, and find her quite easily, right?
One would think.
One would think. Now, none of Martin Luther King Jr.'s relatives are called Ilana, although one of his grandchildren, Yolanda Renee King, is about the right age. Now, it was said that when certain people, the Annie and Laurel comes into this so clearly, right? When some people have watched the video of when he said this originally, people were saying he didn't say Ilana Remikee, he actually said Yolanda Renee King. And she is around about the right age. And the audio with it being like distorted,
you said.
Yeah.
So one of Martin Luther King's grandchildren will become president.
Yeah, and apparently Renee, or Yolanda Renee King, is a fantastic speaker, which, to be fair, that kind of runs in the family, doesn't it, with the Martin Luthers?
That it does.
They are quite good at that. So maybe, you never know, the first female president of the United States of America is going to be Yolanda Renee King, and we will only know when we hit 2028.
Like I said, unless it's some sci-fi movie thing happens, it ain't happening. She's too young.
Yolanda Renee King was born May 25th of 2008.
Yeah.
She's too young. She can't qualify.
Not unless we have the zombie apocalypse like we've all just spoken about, and then all of a sudden a re-elected president and major changes occur in the government scenario and all that shit.
Well, see, as long as I'm alive, I'll say, sorry, honey, you're not qualified. I'm the only one over the age. You got to vote for me.
Then it'll be total anarchy.
Oh, no, it's going to be totally fun.
Beer requirement every night at 6 o'clock.
Hell yeah! And zombies got to go. There's no this. Why is it going to take years to kill out something that can barely walk? Come on, seriously, cap them some bitches. Let's move on.
Okay. Well, I just found this. I found it funny. I have to say, because, like you say, there's so many holes in this. It's absolutely untrue. But this thing about a government secret, experiment about time travel is not an unknown thing. We've spoken about plenty of other times where it's supposed to have been all under this banner of the government experiment of time travel. And time travel is still being looked at and talked about with physicists and scientists to this day.
Talked about. Dave, this is your topic, brother. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to cut the leash off Dr. Dave. Dude, do your thing.
Do your thing. Go on.
So everyone... According to the scientific community, though, pretty much time travel is not possible. And I don't agree with that necessarily. I just don't think it's possible in the ways that we currently conceive it with the models that we have today and our understanding of science and physics and so forth. But that's not to say, and here's where it gets really fishy. So that's not to say that there isn't a sparkle of truth in any of this, because we have no clue what goes on behind top secret closed doors.
True.
In the various governments throughout the world. And let's just look at this for what it is. And this is where the conspiracy theorist comes in a little bit. So we all know about 9/11 and all the other various incidents that have occurred. But in the U.S., 9/11 was pretty much the last big thing to happen. And there hasn't been another one since, even though there's been threats of it. Now, one could say, it's the intelligence community doing their job, but anyone who's anyone knows that the intelligence community is like the most uncooperable group of people you can find who don't like to trade information.
Uh-huh.
Even when told to and forced to and ordered to, they don't like to exchange information.
Uh-huh.
So if a group's like this is so close-mouthed, the likelihood that all these incidents would have been stopped by normal means, I kind of start to question and wonder, what if we do have some sort of top secret project? So there was a TV show, I know this is TV show, it's Hollywood, that kind of thing, called 7 Days back in the 90s that I really liked. And it was basically that they recovered a technology from a crashed UFO in Roswell back in the 50s, and that they adapted parts of that technology and built a sphere that could generate a little temporal pulse and travel back in time 7 days. So basically, they could only travel backwards in time 7 days, and they could go back and undo an event. So they had, between the point zero when the event occurs and 7 days after, they had all that time to collect as much information as possible to determine how the best way to stop an event from occurring. And then they could travel back in time and undo it. So if that technology potentially was possible at some point, if it isn't already, then it's kind of would explain why we haven't had any major, incidents here in the U.S. of terrorism.
Ooh.
Because it's not like we haven't gone around pissing off the rest of the world, especially the Islamic community. I mean, come on, people.
Well, you're true.
Mm-hmm.
So I start to wonder if that, out there somewhere, and pardon me, I have to cough for a second. And I muted. He didn't.
Nope. I just messed with you.
And, I start to wonder, is this possible? And I don't know, I'm probably just dreaming, having a pipe dream, and it really isn't. But I don't know. There's a lot of advances of things that people have been talking about and breakthroughs in technologies. And one of them is quantum computing. Now, quantum computing is revolutionary in a lot of ways because one of the biggest fears about quantum computing is that it will bring about the end of all encryption as we understand it today. And that's because the quantum computer could crack the encryption key in seconds versus what would take a normal computer months or years. Now, the other thing that's been talked about is there's a lot of interesting phenomena with quantum computers that they're studying that has to do with the actual physics of the universe. And that they've been able to actually detect certain phenomena and things and events occurring by studying these processors, these quantum processors and how they work, and the random noise that's in the processor. Now, keep in mind, these processors are cooled at like below absolute zero temperature. It's like very, 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 very cold. And that's because heat generates noise. So they run these processors so cold that there's absolutely no noise generated from these processors functioning. And yet there's still some interesting phenomena that occurs on the quantum level. And because of the speed and the nature of these processors, they're actually able to study these things a little bit more closely. So I don't know. If we're, like I said, if we're not already there, I could envision that maybe we will be soon at some level, just because of the level of technology that's currently being researched and worked on. I can see us getting there.
Time travel.
Actual time travel.
It's not a new theory, though, is it?
No,
when
it's
you look
not.
at some of the, it's not new. Back in 1943, you had the huge Philadelphia experiment scenario.
Huge what?
Philadelphia experiment.
The
alleged
Philadelphia
experiment.
Is that in the Alpaca Mountains?
Alleged. What do you mean alleged?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The actual Philadelphia experiment.
Actually, it's not alleged that there was an experiment. It's alleged that if it's as hyped up as it's been made.
Well, okay, sorry. Okay, fair enough. We kind of know a bit about that one. And then even Camp Hero. When you look at some of the stories that came out about Camp Hero.
Tell me about it.
Camp Hero, basically, you know the TV series based on, it was based on basically the story of Camp Hero. Camp Hero is I can't remember where it is now, but it's an American naval base that converted, and they allegedly stole children, boys, and brought them up in an environment that was set so they used psychic ability. They ended up using psychic abilities, and they used these psychic abilities to. The TV show was called Stranger Things. I don't know if you saw it. There's dead silence, so I take it nobody saw it.
She forgot to turn her mic on.
Yeah,
I love it.
And that series was what, you know, they based that around what Camp Hero was supposed to have been, was using these children that they'd, you know, used their psychic abilities to contact aliens and telepathic interaction and all that. And they ended up doing a time travel. Now, one of the kids from there ended up saying, which was a little bit weird because it only came out after the Philadelphia experiment was released, film, that he was actually on the ship, the Eldridge, and he went back in time, found his brother, came back. Oh, it was all very convoluted, but very conspiracy theory and all that. But look into Camp Hero. It's really interesting. Let me just try and find my research on that because I did a load of research on it and I've forgotten all the details. But as I say, this theory about time travel is not new. This is not a new thing. It's been around for years. I mean, what was Eldridge, the HMS, or HMP or whatever you call it over there? That was in 40s, wasn't it? 43?
That's correct. Yeah, so it's definitely something that's been interested in, and you know it's kind of what's interesting about that is the myth and the stories behind the whether it's true or not about the Philadelphia experiment. Really, they weren't trying to do time travel; they were trying to basically cloak a destroyer or a battleship so that it couldn't be detected by radar.
That's right. And they reckon they had Tesla coils on either end of the ship, don't they? Mm-hmm. So it was all based around Tesla technology, effectively.
Yeah. So, you know, who knows what actually really happened? But because I'm not there, I don't know. I saw the movies and stuff, and you know, they were okay. But I don't know what the real truth is. I've read all the stuff about it online and stuff, and I don't know. I just it's kind of a little fishy.
I think you're right. I think an experiment was done, but whether or not they actually managed to achieve what they
now, I can believe that people are fused in the bulkheads and stuff because they maybe they created a intense electrical field with a large Tesla coil and actually melted the bulkheads, and people literally fell through the floors. And that I can believe that. You know, but nothing so crazy as time travel or anything with that.
It's fascinating. When you look into it, it is quite fascinating. Well, the Camp Hero I was talking about is actually on Long Island, New York. I found my research now. And this, as I say, it is a real site. You can go and visit it. It's actually a park now. It's all sealed up and, you know, it's shut down and it's not a working site. So it was shut down in 1981 and it's now a state park. And so that's, you know, quite good. Now, Preston Nichols was the guy who sort of blew the experiment out of the water. And it was actually something to do with Project Rainbow, which I don't know what Project Rainbow turned out to be, but it was also to be the Cameron brothers. And, it's all to do with the Philadelphia. It all links in. And this is the point. These stories have been around in various sorry, Richard, USS Eldridge, not the HMS. Naval terms, my strong point, clearly, a bit like my portholes.
And the Alpaca Mountains.
My Alpaca Mountains. Anyway, I always do this on the American show. Philadelphia, I said.
She
not
did say
Delphi.
it right. She said it right.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you. But these concepts have been around for a long time, this time travel thing, even so like going back to the 1940s when they were like using Tesla technology to try and achieve that. So who knows where we are now? When if they were doing that in the 40s, that's like 80 odd years ago now. They must, you're telling me that if they achieved something out of the Philadelphia, you're telling me that they suddenly went, we got so far, but we're not going to bother developing it any further. They're going to, aren't they? If you have a certain amount of success with something.
If you had success with it, you would definitely want to push it further and let people know that it was successful. And look what we did. And let's see what we can do now. Let's keep going because they're going to get money for their experiments.
Well,
yeah.
Keep in mind, it's all government research. They're getting money regardless. And they're not going to let it know because no one's allowed to talk about it. It's top secret. But I'm looking at these pictures at Camp Hero. This is kind of interesting. They put huge, talk about wanting to seal something off and don't want to get into it. They put these huge 4 foot or 6 foot thick block in front of the entryway into one of the main buildings.
Yeah.
To keep people out of it. Talk about your overkill.
There was underneath, there was like a huge tunnel system as well, allegedly. That allegedly what they did was they filled with concrete. Well, that begs the question of why would you fill it completely with concrete? Why wouldn't you just seal it up?
Seal it
up. There was
up.
nothing to see.
So obviously there was something, or they would not try to hide it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my guess.
It says it's
they
haunted
didn't tear it
too.
down, which means it's highly, whatever's in it is probably highly dangerous. And it's probably radioactive. Is probably why they have it sealed the way they do, honestly. Because if it was radioactive, they wouldn't risk pulling out the radioactive material from it. They would just seal it up and shield it as much as possible and walk away. As opposed to removing everything, cleaning it up, and so forth. Because it would be incredibly expensive. Not only that, but dangerous to the public in general to remove any kind of severely radioactive materials. Who knows what they were doing down there?
Well, Preston Nichols, we looked into him a little bit. Now he received degrees in parapsychology, psychology, and electrical engineering, and he worked in defence electronics, working with airborne instruments and stuff like that. And his job, apparently, on this project was discovering and accessing repressed memories. And that's where the Cameron brothers came in, because they were allegedly on the Philadelphia experiment. Honestly, read into this because it's absolutely fascinating. Now, one of the kids was a guy called Al Bilek, and he was one of these kids that was supposed to have been in this. And he said that when he worked with Preston and his memories came flooding back, and his name wasn't that name after all. He was actually born Edward Cameron, who worked aboard the Eldridge. Honestly, absolutely fascinating.
So
Aliens and all sorts. It comes into aliens and all sorts.
Can I tie this into paranormal for 1 second?
Of course you can.
Okay, I just shared a picture in the chat room.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about the structure here is it looks identical, except for the big "Do not enter close to public" block, or blocks, I should say. They're blocking the entryway. It looks identical, including the little chimney stack up there. It looks identical to something on the grounds at Henderson, which is one of the places I did a 6-month investigation at.
Right.
That was sealed off and we couldn't go into.
So did they tell you at Henrington why it was sealed off?
Well, nobody told us anything at Henderson because they didn't want to talk about it. It was, that old tuberculosis hospital, and the state really didn't really want us there, but they, begrudgingly let us in there until they sent some engineer out there to discovered that there's like asbestos everywhere, and they freaked out.
Oh gosh.
But we knew that going into it. That's why we used masks and everything, protective gear. But it's just interesting that on the side of the hill near the railroad tracks, there's something that looks almost identical to this. I'm not saying it necessarily means anything. It's just kind of interesting because that wasn't a government institution per se, or I guess it was sort of a government institution back then in the 1920s with tuberculosis. Who knows? Maybe it's the same, Army Corps engineers building the same type of structures for various bases and facilities and stuff.
Is that also what they looks like down there at Point Pleasant for the bunkers with Mothman?
Mm-hmm. It could be standard. It could be standard military kind of. When you shut a place up, it's a standard way of doing it.
Interesting. Okay.
Possibly.
So here's one of the bunkers at Point Pleasant. So it's a little different, but it's it's a simple.
But if you want to make a bunker into the hillside,
it's on a hillside.
That's the way you're going to do it. You're going to make a doorway, an access doorway. You have to reinforce it with the concrete and all that other stuff. And if being those were ammunition bunkers, you have to put them where they could take a blast in case something explodes. So, if you go over here at Monsanto Mountain, they got those same kind of doorways going into the side of the hillside, except for they're way bigger and way thicker because they were doing nuclear testing there and other things. They're doing genetic testing also.
They do look similar. That shows it's open, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's so you can look how thick the door is too. That way you can seal them. You can seal the doors from the inside or the outside. If you're on the inside, you're usually pretty well just screwed.
Yeah. I mean, to some degree, if they're protecting their installations from bombing or, attack, then it probably is standard military kind of thing.
Absolutely. Because you have to withstand the outside attack, then you have to be certain thickness and everything else. And yeah, because look how thick those doors are. Those aren't thin little, like your door in your home. That's
No.
Yeah. And even if you're not building a specific facility for those specifications, you're going to reuse materials and design engineering plans and stuff like that as much as possible, so you don't have to spend man hours creating and money creating more engineering plans.
More of the same.
Yeah, you can go, it works there, so we'll just use the same format here. But so when you was talking about Henrington, was it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's a hospital, though.
That was a tuberculosis hospital built in the 1920s that treated African Americans at the time.
But the question then would beg, why would they build that to military standards if it's a hospital?
Well, that's what I was saying. Government reusing. So Army Corps engineers ends up doing all that kind of stuff.
Right, I see.
So it's probably just reusing the same engineers, and they're just like, well, we'll just build this here.
Or it's a whole conspiracy theory that maybe something more was going on there.
Yeah, but there was also some weird storage tanks that we found around there too, which is kind of interesting. But never did figure out what that was about.
Well, on that first picture, if you blow it up, it just looks like they've got a slab of concrete leaned up against the front of it. There's no door to it.
Right.
Yeah,
it
there's
does.
You can see the hinging on it.
It does, but also that whole big "do not enter" close to public part.
Right.
That also is a big block that's in front of it, because usually there's a door behind a smaller set of doors to go into a place like that. So I think what they did was
the doors is behind that "do not enter" slab.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just weird. But anyways, we're getting off track because we're talking about time travel instead of just going back in time and looking at stuff.
We've gone into a time loop.
Exactly. Temporal paradox, people. And
see, the other thing is, if he really was, going back to the article originally, if he really was part of this secret government experiment, time travel thing, if it was really true, do you really think the government would allow someone to come out and say that, unless they know that everyone's going to go crackpot? You know what I mean?
Well, they're probably not all that concerned about it because, like you said, everybody's going to be like, he's full of crap.
Yeah.
Well, also, maybe that agency doesn't exist yet.
Oh, my God.
Now there's a concept.
So they probably really are going, this guy's a crackpot traveling back from the future. Whatever. We don't have that technology yet. Do we? Bob, do we? No? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we might do. We might do. Oh, dear.
That's kind of like in the Independence Day. It's like, well, actually...
It's not entirely true. And everyone just looks at you as you say, what? I love that film. I love that film. It is an interesting concept, but... So going forwards, they think that we can go forward in time, but not back, don't they? Now, hasn't this been looked at recently?
Do what?
Well,
you can go one way, but you can't go the other.
You got to have a way to come back, or they don't know you went anywhere.
Well, yeah, I'm just repeating what I've been reading.
So then he could have came back.
I do like the sites I read on sometimes because they're so credible, you know.
Oh my God! It's on the internet. It has to be true.
Exactly. Oh, come on now, guys! It's like the sun. It's got to be true. It's in the sun. It's
And
a
the
newspaper
Earth
in the UK.
The Earth is flat too,
and the Earth is
hollow.
And Australia doesn't exist. Yep. Yeah. Sorry, it doesn't exit.
I put that post the other day where the Earth was a donut. That way everybody's happy. It's round. It's got a hole in the middle. It's flat.
Oh, that's funny.
Donut Earth.
So here's why I think that time travel is possible in both directions. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Ready.
Hell yeah. I'm going to get
directly into the
paranormal.
This is why I think it's possible.
Go on then.
Leave aside the physics completely for a moment. Leave aside the understanding of how we would do it and how we would accomplish it technologically for a second. And let's talk about the metaphysical world, and let's talk about psychics. Let's talk about mediums. Let's talk about remote viewing, and let's talk about people who are able to see incidents from the past and experience them, as well as see incidents from the future that are yet to come and tell people about it. We call them psychics. We call them mediums. We call them, whatever, But if these people can tap into an energy and look into the past and see, not just get an impression or a thought or an idea from that, but actually have an image or a video streaming in their head of an event that happened in the past, or they can see something that's going to happen in the future, an event that's going to happen, a plane crash. You hear about people saying that they dreamt about a plane crash and then it did, or they dreamt about something and they experienced the next day. If you can experience these events and whether it's in the past or in the future with your mind, psychic, I guess, then why wouldn't we be able to travel there once we achieve the level of technology necessary to do so?
Sorry, it's my
Right.
brain exploding. Because I don't know is the answer to that question. I don't know. You're asking somebody who's not really technically minded at all.
What you're saying is that you think that it would be possible for if somebody is like a psychic or a medium, remote viewer, whatever, they have the ability to see into the future or to see into the past.
Right.
Either way. They do that with their mind, with their soul, with their spirit. You think that eventually we would be capable of not only just having our soul, our mind, our spirit go to the future or go to the past, but actually have our body do so at the same time.
Yeah. Who's to say it's not going to be a combination of technology and psychic gifts, using psychic gifts to target to that point in time? To focus the technology towards that time, whether it's in the past or the future, and able to transport you from point A to point B in time, not just space.
Well, random number generators showed a reaction, didn't they, pre 9/11? So if there is something going on before an event.
Every major event that's ever happened in the world, for instance, the Indonesia tsunamis that killed over 100,000 people, 9/11, other terrorist acts and so forth around the world, every major event that's ever occurred since the dawn of electronics, and they started tinkering around with random number generation and experimenting with that, they've noticed they have these farms of random number generators. And yeah, that sounds completely, just completely ridiculous, right? Why would you have all these things that are just generating random numbers? Well, because when you start looking at the random numbers that are being generated and they start all getting in sequence and lining up right before something happens, it's kind of interesting, a phenomena. It's like the universe kind of goes, something steps in and goes, and it's like we're detecting the blip in the matrix, as it were.
Yeah, it is a little like that, isn't it? But that's happened on, like you said, several events. So surely, if that's happening, so my brain's creaking, if that's happening, then there's a recognition that something is going to happen in the future because it's showing in the present and the event hasn't happened yet.
Absolutely. And I think we've seen evidence also that time travel has occurred. Maybe, like I said, it may have not been done by anyone who has been born yet. It may have, but it doesn't negate the fact that it could be happening hundreds of years in the future, and they've come back to here. So I think we've seen evidence, though, of temporal changes that have occurred in our timelines, and I think I think some of it may be related to the Mandela effect, what people experience as having different memories. But I also think that some of it may be related more closely, and it's like on the verge of my brain. I'm having trouble forming the thought here. I forgot where I was going. That's the problem.
I'm just listening.
Okay, so the future. I've completely lost it.
I love
where I was going.
I never had it.
It is a hard one to grasp, isn't it? Because then we start looking at, okay, say we can do this, say we do achieve this. Is it right to do so? Because then surely the temptation would be, for example, and this is just to throw it out there, wouldn't the temptation then be to go back in time and kill somebody that's really been bad, like Hitler, for example, you know what I mean, and change world history? And what effect would that have if we start popping backwards and forwards in time? You know, there's...
Or win a major lottery.
So would I. I'd love to do that.
You know, that would change your life in the future.
Maybe.
It would, wouldn't it? if you pop the future and grab the numbers and come back and then put it on at that right time, or
Right.
you know,
Oh, now we're doing that movie Back to the Future.
we're now on Back to the Future, but
Yeah.
you know, look at the problems that occur, you know, that
So then
caused. I know it was a film, but you don't know it could do the same thing.
And then you have
you
the
live-
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm trying to think. If you live in the future, say 100 years in the future from now, and they have the capability to time travel at that point, and you travel backwards, do you travel backwards as yourself, or do you travel backwards and become somebody along your family line?
Now you're getting in the quantum leap.
It was accidental, believe me.
Before we go there, I'll say this. Another thing I liked about 7 Days, and they illustrated the butterfly effect pretty well on this show. When the star of the show was the not cosmonaut, chrononaut, who was sent back in time in the sphere. He went back in time, and he placed some bets on a game. He was like a gambler. He placed the bets on the game and lost horribly, but he knew the outcome of the game. Emergency happened. He ends up being sent back 7 days. He solves the emergency, prevents it from happening. All's well, goes and bets on the game with the winners now that he knows who the winner is, and the outcome of the game changed. It's a butterfly effect.
Yep.
Your presence stepping into the past alters the future from that point forward. So not necessarily all events will unfold the way you expect them to. In fact, the further you get away from your point of origin, stepping into the past, the more likely events are to differ astronomically. Because there's more effects that have occurred that interact with each other that we don't see on that finite level.
Imagine that if you knew that Jay Lynch was going to become president, and he was evil, and annihilate a whole race of people.
Oh, no! My God! What am I gonna be evil for?
And you know this, so you have this technology, so you come back.
The only thing I want to annihilate is bad beer.
And you come back to
no more Coors Light.
2018, where he decided to run for presidency or whatever,
And shoot me.
and you could get rid of him.
Great.
But you could have someone in your family line. You could come back and almost like have all of your knowledge go to that person, so that Carrie realized that she wakes up in the morning and realizes, oh my God, Jay's totally evil. We have to get rid of him somehow.
More like totally perverted.
So
I'll have more blue dresses than you.
Now we enter into a little bit of area of paradox, and here's why. You've witnessed events. You're established in the timeline. You're a part of the events now. You've witnessed this evil taking place. You decide to take an action. You hop in your time machine and go back to 2018, and you show up in 2018 and you kill off Jay. You just undid yourself. And here's why. Because the instant you make a change and alteration to the timeline, at some point you will cease to exist because you will no longer be in that timeline. It's a really weird concept when you're integrated into a chain of events that you can't detangle yourself from it. You are still part of those chain of events. So now if you were, let's say Hiroshima. Say you were there before it went off, you knew it was about to happen, but then you stepped back in time and undid it. Now you're not part of that outcome of the events. Now when it gets undone, the chain of events doesn't cause you to unravel, doesn't cause you to kind of fade away. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It just means that that instance of you, per se, in the multiverse, as it were, ceases to exist because that timeline dissolves. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Heads exploding.
No, well, so what you're basically saying is if you was going to go back in time to change a historic event, you could not be connected in any way, shape or form to that event.
Right.
So if I wanted to go and sort of like
It
change
would have to
history
be before the event really happened, most likely anyways, I would think. Because
so if I knew something was going to happen in 3 weeks' time, and I go, right, okay, I know that's going to happen, I'm going to pop back in history and get rid of the scientists that developed that technology or whatever it was, for example. Yeah, I could, but once the event's happened, that's it done. You can't change it. So you couldn't go back now and kill Hitler.
Well, you can't go back now and kill Hitler for many reasons. One is it ethically and morally correct to do so? And here's why, because there's two sides of this morality here. Yes, you go back and kill Hitler in 1933, 30, whatever year before the Holocaust. Save millions of Jews, millions of Polacks, millions of people, millions and millions of people gets their lives saved. But now you've altered the timeline so drastically that the future you come back to is nothing like you were at, because now you've introduced the interactions of millions of more people into the scheme of things. You have millions of more variables of people getting together, marrying, falling in love, having children, sometimes not what used to happen in the past or what originally happened in the past as far as coupling and so forth. So now you have people that will never born.
Coupling.
And all that. So the further you get away from something like that as well, the harder it is to go back and change it, because the more drastically you're going to change the future, you would be coming back to a strange world that you're not any familiar. It would just be like if you and I went to the future 100 years from now. We'd be like, "What the hell is going on?" It would be a complete.
Yeah. But then could you go? But then if you did that, if you went back and you killed Hitler and you come back to your time, because we've established that you can go back and forth. So you come back to your time and things are just so totally out of whack, unbelievably out of whack. Could you travel back again and
stop yourself from doing it?
Maybe not stop yourself from doing it, but stop the actual action, like food poisoning or whatever.
Well, that also
could you imagine? Could you? God, yeah, because that's a paradox, isn't it?
Here's another part of the paradox, Carrie. Most of the rocket science technology that NASA has and so forth
actually came from
research that was done by Hitler's people, by Germany. So imagine if you went back and altered that complete timeline like that. How drastically you might have altered technology in the future to the point that the time machine that you actually use to get back doesn't exist, and thus it goes out of existence, even if you don't. Or you might have caused yourself not to exist just because your parents no longer met, because they met, your great-great-grandparents, met in, or one side of your great-great-grandparents met in camps and survived, had children, and then down generations. Here your parents meet. Well, maybe now one or both of your parents don't exist anymore.
I mean, if you look at it in that way, my grandparents met because my nan was a nurse and my granddad was injured, and she served him. She served him. She did. She served him in the hospital. Do you know what I mean? That's how they met. And so if we had changed the fact that all of a sudden there's not that particular war because Hitler's not around, they may never have met. So, yeah, you're quite right there.
Yeah. Now, then when you go back to quantum leap,
what would happen to you? Because if you came back, you wouldn't exist. So how could you get back?
Could you imagine that? You're right. So you get this great idea.
Poof, hanging out there?
And that's why it gets ridiculous to think about changing past events too far back in the past, Because the further back you go from any event, forward or backwards, the more change is likely to occur.
Yeah. So you've got this technology and you're sitting there going, right, I've got this great idea, I've got this technology, I can go back, and I'll use Hitler as an example because it's way back in history. And then you do that. But then your future self goes, oh, shit, that was a bad mistake. So I'll go back and tell myself not to do that in my time machine. And it's like, oh, God, like cross timelines here, there and everywhere, wouldn't it? Oh, dude, it just blows your mind when you think about it. And if that blows our minds on a really basic level, you can imagine what these scientists who are allegedly trying to develop this technology must be going through.
Oh, I can imagine.
A lot of alcohol.
Yeah, it's Captain Chris, really, isn't it?
It
That's why he drinks so much.
It comes down to a real simple thing, which is let's not try to change the future. Let's not try to change the past. Let's not try to change the present by going to the future and bringing things back from the future. Let's just explore the past and history and try to see what really happened in history while trying our best to not touch it and disturb it.
Yeah, so you're an
what really happened on the
unparticipating
cross
observer
in Jerusalem.
Yeah,
yeah,
Jesus, God, you could
stuff like that.
Could you imagine? Yeah, you're an unparticipating observer, so you'll be able to be there to see it, but you couldn't actually interact or be involved in any way or change anything.
Maybe now this is where we only have 2 minutes here, but maybe this is where Quantum Leap steps in. So in Quantum Leap, the TV show with Scott Bakula, thank you, Scott Bakula. Al was his friend who was the hologram back in the machine, who was focusing his image into his brain so that he could communicate with him across time. Well, maybe instead of us actually traveling in time physically, and maybe what we're going to end up doing is traveling in time with a projection, using quantum computer technology, using maybe psychic talents to project and aim the machinery, but be able to actually be like an astral observer. And I use the term astral just because that's just to get the concept kind of like not there but there. You can see everything, you can hear everything, but you cannot interact and disturb it. And maybe that's what we'll be able to do. Who knows?
Who knows, indeed. Anyway, we've run out of time now, haven't we?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David, for bringing some brain-mushing concepts onto the show. It's been good,
I got some
though. Enjoyed it.
I need Tylenol.
I'm good. Y'all have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us in the chat rooms, and we'll see you next week.
Good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.